whenever I'm traveling, walking down alleyways, looking for old buildings, derelict buildings, neglected buildings, trying to capture stuff before it disappears. And then hopefully in some number of years, I'll have built up somewhat of an archive of what cities have looked like and how they've changed from an urban living and architecture perspective. My name's Jack Greenberg. I'm currently studying at Korea University GSIS. My major is International Development and Cooperation. I'm from Canada. I've been in Korea a year and a half now. More as a personal interest, I'm very interested in urban redevelopment in Korea, old apartments, different types of housing and architecture, and how cities across Korea are changing. I think it has a lot to do with walking. I love to walk. I love to take pictures. So when I have free time, I'll pick a neighborhood or pick a subway station and just walk. There's so many things in this country that, people don't know about them. They're hidden down alleyways. They're out in the countryside. So, I don't necessarily go to places expecting to find certain buildings or to see certain things, but they're kind of things I discover as I walk, and I get a much better understanding of what life is like for different classes, different demographics within Korean society, and also how terrain changes as a result of just modernization and government policies and real estate costs. So yeah, that's kind of where my interest has lied, and just over time, once you kind of get into it, it's like a rabbit hole. You want to see more. One of the sites that kind of really got me interested in old apartments in Korea was Banpo, Banji, south of the river in the Banpo area. And the Banpo apartments were kind of the first modern condominium style apartments in Seoul. And when I was walking and kind of saw this huge development, well over 50 buildings if I recall correctly, and some of them were built with US aid. And the redevelopment process was just getting underway when I first stumbled upon them and started doing research all about, the history of them and, how they were designed, how they were funded. And then over the next, up until really December of last year, was, visiting them every couple of months, seeing how redevelopment had kind of rolled out. And on my last visit, it was most of them were gone. Or had been demolished. I was able to see a few of them get actually hit by the wrecking ball by a demolition crane, and got some photos of that. And I write about a lot of these places on Twitter, and this one in particular kind of blew up. And there was a lot of former residents commenting on it. Brings back nostalgia seeing this, or this is where I grew up, consider it my goyang or hometown. So that was interesting for me too. There was a kind of a human side to it. Right now, I think there's a lot of city hanoks starting to disappear, or they've been disappearing for years, but I think in some areas pace is accelerating. Now we're starting to see not only little shacks and houses being raised, but it's also, we're seeing large-scale apartment complex being demolished, because these were built in the late 60s, the early 70s, even into the 80s. And at that time, building standards aren't what they were today or are today. And it's coming time that these have to be renewed to make them more habitable and comfortable for the people living in them. And also, some of the apartments are only 4 or 5 stories. So in the city is raising building height limits and trying to make communities more dense, building upwards. So we're seeing, 5-story buildings that are kind of crumbling being demolished and redeveloped as 35-story towers. And so we're seeing kind of the transformation of one generation of apartments to the next. So like a Banjihas is a semi-underground basement apartment. And back in the 1970s, it was actually ordered that all new builds would have a banjiha put in them. And the banjiha were not built with the expectation that people would be living in them. This was a time where the threat of conflict with North Korea was at a fairly high level. And so banjiha were actually shelters for people to evacuate to in case of an attack from the north. But over time, as housing became scarcer and there was an influx of people from the countryside in the provinces to Seoul, a lot of banjihas started to be repurposed as affordable accommodations for living. You at one time had a lot of students living in banjiha. You also have that now in some areas like Shilimdong around Seoul National University and other universities in the city. But now you have a lot of low-wage workers in them, as well as the disabled, elderly. People have adjusted them a bit, renovated them a bit to try to make them somewhat livable. And they appeal to people who can't necessarily afford other types of perhaps more glamorous or comfortable accommodation. And usually banjiha don't have the same deposit requirements that apartments and office tels and require of the renter. Normally you're going to a banjiha because it's probably one of the best things that you can afford to live in. I wouldn't say most people are going to them out of a choice, that if they had the money they'd probably go elsewhere. So there's a number of risks involved in living in a banjiha. One of the first ones is lack of sunlight. You don't have windows or large windows in them that let in a lot of natural light, and you kind of need natural light to have the right serotonin levels, and that affects mental health. So that's one thing. Also being underground, there's the risk of moisture and mold. Not great to be breathing those things in. Also, they don't normally have carbon monoxide alarms or fire alarms. A lot of them make use of LPG, like the natural gas cylinders, for cooking and heating, so there's a fire risk in them. A lot of them don't have sump pumps or drainage, so when there's very heavy rainfall, they're at risk of flooding. And that's kind of what we saw last year when Seoul experienced very hard flooding back in August, and a number of residents in Banjihas were unfortunately killed. Those, I would say, are kind of the main risk factors involved in living in a Banjiha. In the event that there's a fire, they're fairly crammed. Evacuating from it is fairly difficult, and the same goes in the case of flooding. Back in August last year, there was record rainfall in some areas of Seoul and in Gyeonggi province, and the Hangang was flooded, and in neighborhoods like Shilimdong, where there's a number of Banjiha concentrated, there's not proper drainage in the municipal system. So a lot of the neighborhoods are on different elevation levels. There's a lot of sloping street. So when you have that much water in such a short amount of time, there's nowhere for it to go to be drained out properly. And unfortunately, because of the amount of rainfall and the lack of proper sewage systems, a lot of Banjiha suffered damages to the physical structure of it, and a lot of people lost belongings and what little they had. And then unfortunately as well, some people drowned inside the Banjiha, either while they were sleeping or they weren't able to evacuate in time. During the flooding, I did go down to Gwanak-gu and kind of wanted a first-hand look at the situation there, and a lot of the streams were flooded. I remember talking to some shopkeepers and asking what they were doing to kind of keep their properties safe, and saw people using makeshift sandbags to keep water out, and unfortunately saw a lot of damaged furniture and piled up on the streets to be discarded because it had been covered in rainwater and such. And so Gwanak-gu, where Shilimdong is, suffered a lot of damage, and in parts of Gangnam as well. And over at the campus of Seoul National University, there was a lot of infrastructure damage, roads on the campus lifted up, fallen trees, a lot of, rubble everywhere. So financial costs and then human costs as well. Banjihas are one option when it comes to affordable housing. A lot of people are aware of places like Goshiwon, as well as the kind of the converted rooftops. So those are popular amongst people looking for affordable housing. But again, there are risks involved in living in those structures. Goshiwon, sometimes people refer to them as like coffin-like housing because they're so small. Like Banjihas, some of them don't have windows, the walls between them are makeshift, poor ventilation, they're crammed, there's fire risks in them. So you encounter some of those same issues. And again, with the rooftop housings, not necessarily meeting all building standards for safe and livable housing. When there are tragedies that happen in those accommodations, like Goshiwon's, when there's a fire, measures are announced, but I don't think we've seen a lot of efforts right now to phase those out. So there are options, and there's also some older apartments that where rent is not as high, and communities kind of on the periphery of the city. So there are places for people to go, but they might not be as cheap as a Banjihas, and the conditions might be quite similar at the end of the day. Maybe it might involve more of a commute. Property prices and affordable accommodation are usually cheaper on the periphery or outside in some of the satellite cities in Gyeonggi province. So that's another reason why some people might be reluctant to move, is if they're working somewhere near where they're currently situated, and if they know there's going to be significant commute time or transportation costs involved, that's a demotivating factor for relocating to maybe safer accommodation in another locale. I think we can't automatically shut down all Banjihas in a super short time frame, and I would not advocate putting them out if they're not going to be somewhere where they can sustain their livelihood. I don't think there's shame in living in them for the people who choose to. So we have to acknowledge it's going to take time, but in that time we can't just throw up our hands and say we'll wait till the problem fixes itself. I think there has to be some interim measures and the opening up of some alternative housing for those who on their part make the choice to move. So I think on the city's end, they have to help facilitate in whatever way they can alternative accommodations for people who are willing to relocate.